Okay.
Okay, Reagan, I'm ready whenever you're.
Okay. So welcome everyone to Breakout Room 1. If you look on the screen in front of you, it has a list of the cities that we are going to be covering in this. It does not look like we have anyone here who is by phone only. So I think if Andrew, you can advance to the next slide, I'm going to sort of go over sort of the rules for this session. So I want to first introduce Andrew McFarland from the MBTA, who will be the main presenter this evening. I will be serving as the facilitator, reading questions and helping that out. We have a note taker in this room, who is Natalie. She should be listed with her name, Natalie, and then ask a question. And she is, I can see that here. So one of the, in order to allow more questions to be asked in this session, what we have decided to do is if you post your questions in the chat and direct them to Natalie, it's Natalie Ask a Question. What we will do is I can see those questions. She'll be sharing them with me, and I will be reading them after Andrew stops his presentation. I will note if you direct message someone else like Andrew or me specifically, I can't guarantee that we will see that question and that we will be able to answer it. So please direct your questions to Natalie. The only verbal questions we'll be taking are for people who were joining only by phone and can't type a question, but I'm looking quickly and there doesn't appear to be anyone in this session who is in that space. So I think, and the other point, I know Doug just said this, but if you do want to move to a different room in the session, if you ask your question, you can always click leave room. You'll go back to the main room. And then you can select a new room. Also, if you want to leave the meeting and rejoin the main meeting at 7:30, you can do that as well. So with that, Andrew, I will turn it over to you to begin asking questions.
Great, thanks, Reagan. Yeah, and first I'm just going to go over some of the route changes in this part of the system. But good evening, everyone. My name is Andrew McFarland. I'm a project manager in the Transit Priority Group at the MBTA. We're the department within the MBTA that works with cities and towns on bus lane projects. So tonight we're going to review some changes that are included in the revised network map. Just to reiterate, those are just changes for Chelsea, East Boston, Everett, Malden, Melrose, Reading, Revere, Stoneham, Wakefield, and Winthrop. Since we released the draft version of the map in May, we received a lot of comments, and we've made changes to about 2/3 of the routes system-wide. I know that Doug reviewed most of this information in the earlier part of the presentation, so I'm just going to skip to the next part. So in this part of the network, there are kind of 4 main buckets of changes that we're going to go over. And I'm just going to go over changes to routes that have changed since the May version of the map. So the first bucket is, in some cases, we have restored services so that the revised version of the map reflects what service is like today. That includes changes for the 100, the 106, the 131, and the 426. Second bucket is rerouting some services so they can better serve medical facilities and senior housing complexes and other key destinations. The routes that are affected in this bucket are the T96, the 99, the T104, the 105, the 108, T109, the 112, the 119, and the 120. Third bucket is we've actually in one case added a new route to the revised proposal for the map. And that's the 113, which I'll describe in a little bit more detail in a sec. And fourth, in one case, we did remove a route from the draft map. That's for the 133. Like I mentioned earlier, we will not be going over routes that have not changed since the May proposal was released. That's going to affect the T110, the T111, T116, the 137, 442, sorry, 450, 455, and the Silver Line 3. So again, we won't be going over those routes in this presentation in the breakout room, but I'm happy to take your questions on those routes. And we also just made one small change to the 132, where we extended the service to midnight, but the route structure itself has not changed. So with that, I will dive into specific routes. So first up is the 133. The 133 was originally proposed in the May version of the map, but it has been removed from our revised version of the map. Instead, we're going to have the 131 serve Woburn Center with all-day service and some improved frequencies in the peak period. In our May version of the map, the 131 was originally proposed to extend to Lynn Central Square, but instead it will terminate at Woburn Center with frequencies of about 60 minutes or better until 7 p.m. every day, and peak period frequencies of 30 minutes or better. The 131 would continue to serve, would continue to terminate at Malden Center Station. So the Route 90 and the Route 113. So the Route 90 was originally proposed to run between Arlington Center and the Market Basket in Chelsea in our May version of the map. In this revised version of the map, the 90 will now run between Clarendon Hill and Somerville in Assembly Square with frequencies of 30 minutes or better all day, 7 days a week. We've created one new route, the 113, which will operate between Assembly Square and Bellingham Square in Chelsea with frequencies of 60 minutes or better until 7 p.m. every day. Next up is the T96. So T96 has been revised a bit based on our May version of the map. It now will terminate near Union Square in Somerville instead of at Porter Square. In Medford, we've also slightly modified the route so it directly serves Winthrop Street and George Street. The T96 also, this is still a high frequency route, so that means that the service will be 15 minutes or better, 7 days a week, 20 hours a day. So this is a major upgrade compared to existing service. The Route 100, this is a route that we had originally proposed going a little bit farther into Medford, but in our revised version of the map, we are essentially just keeping the 100 what it is today, in that we're also having service go until 1 a.m. in the evenings. Route 99. So the Route 99 has been merged with the Route 97, and we have made some changes in the revised version of the map. We restored service to Commercial Street and Hancock Street in Malden and Everett. The proposed Route 99 also serves the Gateway Center Shopping Plaza, and this would be in service until 1 a.m. The Route 108 service, so this has been restored. We have restored service to Edgeworth via Highland Ave and Middlesex Ave, along with Riverside Ave and Fellsway in the revised version of the map. The Route 108 is also extended on the other side of by Kennedy Drive, so it's going beyond Kennedy Drive to Linden Square. Since the Route 99 is covering the Gateway Center Shopping Plaza, the Route 106 has been routed out of the Gateway Center, so it's going to be doing essentially what it does today with service terminating at Wellington Station. Route T109. So with the Route 108 serving Salem Street the Route 109 service has been restored to Eastern Ave, so similar to what it does today. Route 105 has been rerouted to serve Bowdoin Street, Newland Street, and Bryant Street in Malden. The Route 104 has been extended to the to Airport Station to make a connection to the Blue Line. Previously, we had the service terminating at Wood Island Station in East Boston. In Chelsea, we've also rerouted the route a bit, so it's been shifted over to Spruce Street, which provides a closer connection to Market Basket, which is a destination that we heard a lot from folks that they want to see better service to. The 112 has been extended to Maverick Square via Meridian Street, East Boston, to provide a Blue Line connection, which replaces the current 114. The Route 120 has been extended to Cottage Hill and the Winthrop Public Landing parking lot. The routing through Orient Heights has also been changed to reflect some roadway directions and some issues with just turning motions for the bus. So there's been a small change in and around Orient Heights. Route 119 has been extended to Cottage Hill and the Winthrop Public Landing parking lot as well. And finally, the 426. And in our revised proposal, the 426 has been rerouted out of Northgate Mall. So similar to today, service will stay on Squire Road in Revere. So with that, I think we're ready for questions and breakouts. Questions in the breakout session.
Yeah, so Andrew, we've
yeah.
already gotten a few that have come in.
Great.
So I don't know if you want to go to the remix map.
Sure thing. Let me just stop the share and I'll pull up the remix.
And I'll remind everyone that if you do have a question, if you direct it in the chat to Natalie, where it says her name will also say ask a question, she will share it with us. So Andrew, when you are situated, I will get started with some questions.
Okay, can folks see this on their side?
Yes.
Great.
So initially, Andrew, there are questions about the 131 and the 137 stopping at Oak Grove. And it's and that the point is that the 131 is described as being restored, but that the new map doesn't show that because currently the 131 and the 137 both stop at Oak Grove today, I believe is the comment. So I don't know about the 131 and the 137. I'm assuming they are no longer stopping at Oak Grove.
Let's so we'll zoom into the map. So the 130, I have the 137 selected, so it would be bypassing Oak Grove Station and going to Malden Center Station. For the oops, sorry, that's the 132. That is the right. Hold on, one sec. And same for the 131. So the 131 would be bypassing Oak Grove and going to Malden Center Station.
So the revised map shows them going to the connection is at Malden Center and not at Oak Grove.
Yes, correct.
Okay. And I would just note, as always, that if people have comments about this, they can share it with the mbta.com BNRD feedback link. The session is mostly to answer questions and clarifications about the revised map. So there were a few questions about that. I don't know, Andrew, if there's, hold on, let me keep going. Sorry, I lost track of the question. There is a question about the 119 and the 120 and whether that will provide circular service in Winthrop, similar to what the 712 and 713 do today.
In terms of I'm not quite sure about circular service, so maybe that's something we can take back, Reagan, to the main project group. But in terms of how these routes serve Winthrop, they are serving similar to like what the service is out there today. So there still will be coverage. I think one of the things that we were trying to do with these changes was just better connect Winthrop with Revere and with East Boston. The service today is very oriented to getting folks to the Blue Line, but doesn't really well connect folks to adjacent communities such as East Boston and Revere. So so if the 120 selected here, it'd be going, I believe this is Veterans Road. So it'd be like along Veterans Road, Shirley, and then out through Revere Street. And the 119 would be making that connection at Orient Heights, and then traveling along Main Street and Pleasant Street.
Great, thank you, Andrew. And so there is, this is more of a comment, so I will read it. I don't think there's anything you need to respond to here other than we will take the comment, which is that there's some concern about that there's no 24-hour service, especially to the airport, and the person is an airport employee and needs to access it at all hours. And it makes the commute really difficult. So I think we will take that comment about the need for or the desire for 24-hour service to the airport for employees. We'll take that in and share that with the team.
Yeah, and I will just add that in general, we have tried to improve the span of service. So like when service starts in the morning and goes into the evening as much as possible. So and we've really tried to think about that 7 days a week because we know that folks are trying to make trips to destinations like the airport and other really busy hubs that are in service, well, 24 hours a day essentially. So we don't have service that's 24 hours a day, but we've tried to improve service so that it's 20 hours a day as much as possible from about 5 a.m. to 1 a.m. for most of our services.
Thank you. So this is a question about the 108 proposal. So there's a question about whether it's true that the 108 will be using Central Ave near Granada Highlands. I don't know if I've pronounced that properly. And if so, the questioner says there's an issue with that the Central Avenue is too steep for a bus to try, and there's a suggestion of having the 105 serve Granada, or if the 108 must serve it, to use Kennedy Drive only. So I don't know if you know that routing at all of the 108, but certainly we can take that comment.
Yeah, and I will say, so initially in the May version of the map, we had the 108 terminating at Kennedy Drive. I will say that we did get a lot of, I'm not quite familiar about, it will be going at Central Ave right here, yes. So just to go back out toward Linden Square, so it'd be terminating kind of near the, there's a Dunkin' Donuts, I believe, like by Beach Street there. One of the reasons that we extended it from Kennedy Drive out to here by Linden Square, as we're seeing in this current proposal, is we heard from a lot of folks in Malden that they want to see better connections over to Linden Square. And this also provides a connection, a transfer opportunity to the proposed T109, which would be a new high frequency service that would connect folks into Sullivan Square, but also over to Somerville and terminating at Harvard Square for a red line connection. So we wanted to make sure that folks from Kennedy Drive could have that kind of like reverse trip opportunity. Like they might not be going toward Malden Center, but they can go back out towards Linden Square and provide that transfer.
Thanks. And in terms of like the steepness and questions about that, that's probably that will all be really detailed during the implementation phase, Andrew, all of those sorts of concerns.
Yep, and I will, thanks for reflecting that too, that part of the question. For one of the things that we spent a lot of time doing over the last 6 months is talking with our operators and our bus operations team to really review these proposals a little bit more closely with them. And we did flag areas where the grade of the street, so if there was like a slope or a turn condition that we felt like it was difficult for a bus, in many cases, we actually had our training school go out there with a bus with a standard 40-foot MBTA bus that you would see out there in service. And we tried some areas. I'm not quite sure if we did it on Central Ave here, but that's something that we do regularly as a part of our all of our planning. We'll be doing that throughout implementation. So that will be, if there is a challenge with that, then we'll address it with some other proposed routing.
I will note there are a few comments about the 137 no longer stopping in Oak Grove, so I want to acknowledge that. And again, we've taken that and we have that in for the record. There's another question in here that I think I might ask you to save it for the main session, but it's a question about how a change in the general manager might affect this project. And I do not want to put Andrew on the spot with answering that question and would suggest the commenter hold that and ask it as a comment in the main session, since Andrew's here mostly to talk about the specific service changes in this area. So hopefully that's okay for everyone.
And Reagan, I can kind of just talk a little bit about the 137.
Sure.
I hear that folks are concerned about kind of just bypassing Oak Grove and going a little farther into Malden and transferring at Malden Center. I think one of the things that we're trying to do in general with these proposed routings is to really think about how we can provide service to key destinations in places where folks want to go to. Malden Center has a number of things that are available to riders. There's obviously a lot of services, public services, but there are also grocery stores, other places that folks are trying to get to. So really trying to think about how we can provide better connections to areas like that. Obviously, there are a lot of transfer opportunities to other MBTA services at Malden Center Station. So whether it's to another bus route or to the Orange Line or to the Haverhill Line. So Malden Center has allowed us to provide myriad benefits to riders.
Thank you, Andrew. So this is a question about the 99, and will it go up Savin Street with a new hospital being built?
So yes, I have the 99 selected. And Reagan, is it possible to, is it the development by the New England Memorial Hospital, or I don't know if it's possible to clarify?
So if the person who asked the question, if they want to put in the chat where to clarify that, that would be helpful. While we're waiting on that, I don't know if you want to stay on the 99 now that you found it. I know it's not easy working with that map, Andrew.
Yep.
But there is a question about, is there a reason why there's no 30-minute bus service to Melrose in the new proposal? This person says they spent many nights waiting for the 10 p.m. Haverhill train, walking 40 minutes late at night, or taking an Uber.
Yeah, and I'm sorry for that experience. In general, be really trying to, in many places, especially on the northern part of the system, we today don't have frequent bus service. There are many places where multiple lower frequency bus routes are overlapping today that provides some sort of good service, but not overall. So one of the things that we were trying to do with this map is to provide more high frequency service to the northern part of the system, especially places like Malden and Everett and Medford, which haven't historically been on our high frequency bus map and have had really high need just based on just having a lot of destinations and trip generation and what have you. So for Melrose, we weren't able to just provide higher frequency service, just given the constraints we have and just our different goals when we're thinking about rerouting services and trying to figure out where we can provide good connections for MBTA bus service in some of those other high need communities. I think also, I know that the person had a question or just an issue with the behavioral line. We were trying to also balance kind of services. So obviously some communities have MBTA services for commuter rail or rapid transit service or bus service, but we're also just trying to think about how we can provide like a greater web of connections. So we weren't able to provide lots of connections in every place, unfortunately.
Thank you for clarifying. I am not seeing the neighborhood of the Savin Street with the new hospital. That I haven't seen that person clarify that yet. So I will continue to go on to the next question. There is a question about the 108 and the 106 and whether it's true that they're going to be coordinated to allow for the Salem Street route in Malden, sorry, to be a high frequency route.
So that's something that we can definitely look into. In general, we are trying to think about some ways that we can improve the scheduling and dispatching to just better coordinate services overall. That is something that I'm not sure if our service planning department has looked into for Salem Street, where the 108 and the 106 would overlap. But in general, that's something that we're trying to do across the board as much as possible.
So we can
Sometimes there are challenges just based on different schedules during different times of day. So it's a little difficult to implement in the moment, but we're trying to do as much as possible.
and we can certainly take that comment back, right, Andrew?
Yeah, definitely. That'd be a good one to pose to Melissa.
So here's a clarification, a question about high frequency. It means less than 15 minutes apart. And the person wants to know how exactly this changes for winter routes.
Yeah, so in this service proposal, our high frequency service bucket, so routes that are 15 minutes or better, 7 days a week, 20 hours a day, that is kind of like our standard across different service seasons. So that is something that we would like to do in winter and spring, summer, and fall. We do change just schedules. We tweak schedules every season, but we would stay within that kind of 15 minutes or better period. So on some routes, headways could be as good as 8 minutes, especially in the peak period. But later in the day or during different seasons, our goal is to have them be at least 15 minutes or better.
So there is I think this is more of a comment than a question, and I will read it just so it's included for this person's to share their perspective, which is that looking for some information about how the MBTA can cut out an entire neighborhood of bus service that has been around for decades, and noting that this person believes many people are going to be adversely affected by this stoppage. I think generally, Andrew, I don't know if you want to speak to that. I'll note if you have your hand raised that we're trying to do all the comments through the chat tonight. So if you have a question, to share it in the chat.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this person has specified like
It did
if
not
there's a
specify the
certain neighborhood.
neighborhood. No.
Okay. I will say in general, we have really tried to um, not leave certain communities out if they're being served today, and really try to improve the frequency of service on streets that have historically had service. Um, in some of the examples that we walked through um, a few minutes ago, really try to bring service back to areas where we'd heard from the public or from municipalities or service providers that they were concerned about changes in service. So in many instances, we've actually restored service to certain streets in this revised version of the map. And if that person had a question about, yeah,
They did just clarify, it's Point Shirley in Winthrop is the
gotcha,
neighborhood in question.
gotcha. Yeah, for Point Shirley, especially really trying to think about um, how we can serve the rest of Winthrop with good service. We had very few folks using that part of the routes, and we're just trying to think about how we can provide better service to the majority of Winthrop.
So I actually have a follow-up question from the person who asked, I think it was the circular service question earlier about Winthrop, which is about whether there will be a seamless connection between the 119 and the 120 at the Winthrop terminus. And the person says currently they can switch between the 712 and the 713 at their Winthrop endpoints without having to change buses.
Gotcha. So um, the way, so I have like inbound versus this is the 119. So that'd be coming in through Main Street and then Pleasant Street to terminate by the parking lot for the ferry. And inbound, it'd be going this direction. And then, I'm sorry, that's outbound. And then inbound would be going the same direction out. And then for the 120, this is the inbound service that would be going to the same location, so making the stop right by the ferry terminal parking lot. And then the outbound would be going essentially the same way out. So there would be like a small section on Shirley Street where this is over the 119 and the 120 are overlapping, but they would be like two independent services as we're envisioning in this version of the map.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. So I do have clarification on the 7th Street Hospital question that regarding the 99. So 7th Street Hospital says it's for Acadia Hospital with over 400 beds at Tufts. So I'm not sure exactly what that means.
I am unfortunately not super familiar with that hospital location, but we can bring it back to the main group.
Yeah, I think that's a
Um,
great idea.
yeah, I can ask the service planner.
Wonderful. We'll make a note of that.
Apologies for that.
I will highlight that. This will be the advantage of, because I'm like the main meeting moderator, I can ask questions.
Got priority.
Exactly.
Put these questions at the top of the list, Regan.
Exactly. So there is a question about whether the Chelsea Street drawbridge is being taken into consideration in route design. The vertical lifts are incredibly slow and cause nasty traffic jams, especially trying to get to and from Logan Airport.
Yeah, that is, I know that that's been like an ongoing issue. So it's something that our service planning department definitely is coordinating with MassDOT and City of Chelsea and City of Boston about just ways that we can improve that. I know Massport's also an important stakeholder in that area as well. So that's something that we regularly kind of consider. I will say for the 104, it would still be going over the Chelsea Street drawbridge and terminating at Airport Station. So that's something that we'll consider in terms of just trying to think about how we can mitigate any disruptions from the bridge lifts as much as possible. In some cases, like for the this proposed change for the 112, we are also thinking about how we can provide connections to other parts of East Boston. So going through via Meridian Street into Maverick Square, whereas the 112 today goes over the drawbridge currently. So that just provides just a couple other opportunities for folks to avoid that onerous drawbridge lift situation.
So I will note this comment, I think regarding to the questions about services to neighborhoods, that the 131 east side of Melrose has been served for many years and is proposed to be removed. So I'm sharing that as a comment, and we will take that back as well. So there is a question here about the T109 and the 113, which is a traffic route change suggestion. Maybe have either or both routes bypass Alfred Street. If the T109, it could go to West Ellington, then to Assembly, then Sullivan, then towards Harvard. And the 113 could go to Wellington before Assembly instead of Sullivan and or terminating at Sullivan. The overall point is that Alfred Street is almost always backed up by traffic.
Thanks for that comment. I think the thing that we're really trying to focus on with these proposed routings is how we can work with roadway owners to secure bus priority. So infrastructure treatments like bus lanes or traffic signal upgrades to improve transit reliability as much as possible. So right now, I think we're focused on this routing and working with City of Everett and City of Boston, City of Somerville, City of Cambridge, et cetera, to see how we can improve buses as much as possible along this route.
A question about, has anyone in the route design considered a shuttle during peak hours from the 2-mile stretch from Deer Island to the Winthrop Landing to connect this large Winthrop neighborhood?
I don't know if that specifically has been considered, but we can take that back to the main group. I know there are also some other opportunities. For instance, the MBTA is involved in an RFP that where we ask cities and towns if they would like to essentially have shuttle services in their area, and then the MBTA provides some funding, and then I believe that city or town can also provide some funding. So I don't have all the details on that program, but that could be a shuttle concept that could be furthered through that program. So that's something to bring back to the main group, Reagan. If we
Okay.
talk about I think it's the supplemental transit program.
I will, I have highlighted the question to bring back.
Thank you.
I do want to, since we do have some time, I'll note that there's about 19 minutes left in this breakout session. If folks have had their question answered and they want to go to other sessions, there's still time. But I will read some of the comments. I know we had prioritized answering questions, but since I think Andrew's answered all the questions that we can, I'll read some of the comments, which is that this one is about Point Shirley and about the 119 and 120. That an entire neighborhood, Point Shirley, now served by the 713 from Veterans Road and Winthrop, is both part hilly and windswept, and the plan as shown leaves about 450 homes 2 miles from any bus service. There are no stores, senior center, or medical facilities in this area now served. How can the decades-old route be totally cut off? So I just wanted to, again, make sure that we were reading the comments since we do have some time in this session, and just noting that we are taking all the comments back to the team as well. I will point out that we still have some time. I think I have gone through all of the questions. If you submitted a question in the chat and it was not answered, please feel free to resubmit it, and my apologies to you. Or if you would like to, again, join a different room If you have questions about, since we don't have that list in front of us, I do have a cheat sheet of what room is what towns. Oh, and I'm being told by the note taker there's another page of questions that I have not seen. Haha. See, thank you so much, Natalie. I'm going to keep going. Um, so more transit priority signaling as possible would be amazing. And that the comment is it's wild that the bus or the green line wait for cars with a fraction of people inside. Andrew, I will let you opine about bus transit signal priority.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I mentioned earlier in the introduction, so I work in the transit priority group. So we're the group within the MBTA that works with cities and towns on bus priority. So bus lanes, transit signal priority, other improvements to speed up buses and make sure that we're providing reliable service. So I have a colleague who is a traffic signal engineer who his entire focus is working with cities and towns on improving traffic signals and making sure that they're communicating with our buses as much as possible. So we are definitely making a lot of inroads with this, but it's always a conversation with cities and towns about how we can line up those improvements as much as possible. So definitely something that we're actively looking into and something that we've made a lot of strides in the last couple of years. I will say though, traffic signals are important. Typically, when we coordinate transit signal priority with surface priority, so bus lanes or queue jumps, like having dedicated space on the roadway for the bus to get to the front of the queue, that's when we see the biggest improvements with transit signal priority. So we try to couple those to infrastructure treatments as much as possible. So especially with all the congestion on our roadways, we want to make sure that we're prioritizing buses as much as we physically can.
And Andrew, that's a big piece with the municipal partnerships piece, right? Like making
Yes,
sure
yeah.
that coordination happens.
Yeah, and just to kind of give you all a sense of how the MBTA has really invested in bus service in the last couple of years. So my position, the folks that I work with on my team were a 5-person team. We hadn't existed prior to 2019. We spend most of our time talking with service area municipalities, whether it's Chelsea or Boston or Lynn or what have you, about how they can improve bus service. So we hadn't had that staff in place up until a couple of years ago, and it's very much a part of our rollout of this vision and how we can better work with cities and towns to improve bus service.
Thanks, Andrew. Here's a question that whether or not for routes 106 and 108, whether it's a routing question, whether Eastern Avenue, which is also known as Massachusetts Route 60, whether that could be used instead of Salem Street in Malden, and that Salem Street is narrow and has a lot of traffic. Eastern Avenue is wider and almost exactly parallels Salem Street. I would assume this is a question we would bring back to the team for consideration. Andrew, I'm not sure that you can comment right now on the specific routing of the route, but
I can, I don't know the specific answer, but I can say in general, like I know Salem Street has a lot more residential land uses along it. So there are a lot more folks living along Salem Street who, we want to make sure that bus service is where people live and work and play and get services. So having service on Salem Street is in general preferable just because it provides better access to folks who are trying to get to, whether it's over to Linden Square or if they're trying to get over to Malden Center Station or what have you. It just provides that better connection for riders. But totally hear the concerns about congestion, and we can definitely talk with the city about some ways to improve service there.
and someone just did write a comment that rerouting Salem Street to Eastern Avenue would cause a lot of complaints by parents of Malden High School kids, among other things. So, and then they said, and that being said, I do think there should be a route down Eastern Avenue besides the 105. So lots of lots of interest in that routing. There are a few comments still about the decision about the 137 and 131 to not stop at Oak Grove. I think Andrew, you've explained a lot about why it's stopping in Malden Center.
Mhm.
I think some of the questions may be getting at like why it doesn't do both potentially. I would imagine that has to do with frequency and those sorts of considerations, but I'll defer to you on that.
Yeah, that's something maybe we can bring back to the main group break-in, but in general, going off of Main Street and kind of into Oak Grove and then back out, it does take some time. Um, and just kind of staying on Main Street provides a more direct connection to Malden Center Station. So, but that's something I think we can bring back if folks have a lot of concerns about that.
Okay, great. Um, so there, again, more vociferous support for including Oak Grove in that, which I think that's less of a question, I think, and more of a comment that we can bring back to Melissa and the team for implementation purposes. So we have about 12 minutes left before we go back to the main session. I want to make sure that everyone did get their questions answered. And Natalie, thank you for flagging the additional questions that I had missed the first time. Again, I will urge you, if you want to go to another room, feel free. If you want to leave this room and go to the main session and take a break, stretch your legs before we start again, we can do that. Oh, and I'm getting there's actually some disagreement about the Oak Grove service happening in the chat. Some people are opposed to it as well. So we'll take all those comments.
Reagan,
But
I will, sorry, I'll let you finish, but I
yeah, go
can
ahead.
also make a plug for something else if that makes sense.
Sure, go ahead.
So I just also wanted to show folks, so this is our project web page. So this is on the MBTA's website, and it has a lot of resources too. So if you have questions that we didn't directly answer tonight, or if you have other questions that pop up, I just wanted to kind of go over some of the materials that are available online as well. So there's a summary of changes, and then we also have breakdowns by route. So they're kind of broken into different bins, but if you expand that, you can see the route, how we're proposing service by service hours and frequency, and any changes that we made relative to the draft map that we released in May of 2022. So I just wanted to kind of call that out for folks. We also have that available in multiple languages, which you can see here. And I was just kind of going over our remix version of the map, which is linked here. We also have like a static version of the map, which is like a PDF that's based on it's very much reflective of the existing service map that we have. And it's a little easier if you're looking for overlapping services in different areas. So I know it's hard to like see services that are overlapping, say like the 106 and 108 on Salem Street. So it's a little bit easier in the PDF version. That's all available online. And like we mentioned earlier, there's some more opportunities for you to share comments online through our online feedback form. And we'll be using the website to just promote information about implementation in the next 5 years. So yeah, just wanted to promote those resources for folks while we have you here.
Thank you, Andrew. I was about to post in the chat the direct link to that page.
Awesome.
But I realized I would be doing it to everybody in the meeting. So I will wait. When we go back to the main session, I know that Amanda will be posting links. So
Great.
I will not do that right now. There is, as we've been talking, there has been a question about the capacity of particular subway stations, like the fact that Malden Center is already overcrowded in the AM peak, and what does this mean if you bring more people to Malden rather than Oak Grove?
Yeah, in terms of I mean, in terms of service over capacity, I'm not sure if they mean like by riders or by buses. But in general, we are trying to, as a part of the implementation plan, we're looking to improve our assets as much as possible, to expand or improve any of the busways or layover facilities or berthing facilities where buses stop, so folks can transfer to, say, Malden Center Station or other
I
MBTA rapid transit hubs. Yeah.
I think the question is actually about riders, like the crowding in the station by riders, not necessarily the infrastructure, but.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's something we can evaluate and just kind of consider going forward, just with any other station improvements that our capital delivery team works on.
Yeah, your team works closely, I believe, with the capital delivery team, so.
Yep.
So there's a question here about, do these changes take into account limitations of electric buses, or would there need to be additional changes as electric and other types of buses are brought into the system?
That's a good question. That's something that we are definitely considering through the implementation process. So we have an agency goal of electrifying our bus fleet by 2040. And as a part of that, our fleet and facilities program is looking to overhaul our MBTA bus garages, many of which have not had any meaningful improvements or rehabilitations in many, many years. So we're using this as an opportunity to improve those garages, think about how we need to upgrade the infrastructure there to accommodate charging. In general, we are coordinating with the fleet and facilities program, but I don't have any specifics to share right now about whether how we're like coordinating with them on service planning specifically.
So we have about 6 minutes left, and I do want to take the opportunity as we start counting down to thank everyone for the very thoughtful questions tonight from this section. I think really helpful, and Andrew, I want to thank you for your answers as well. I can see there are 5 minutes left in the sessions. I just saw the broadcast message. If you do have some additional questions, feel free to share it in the chat. Otherwise, I think you can leave the room and wait in the main room, or we can all hang out here together for a little bit.
I'm also happy to take questions about bus lanes because that's my bread and butter. So, but yeah, thank you, Reagan, and thank you everyone for your engagement. I know there are things that folks they like about the map, they don't like about the map. I just encourage everyone to stay engaged and to keep communicating with the MBTA as we roll out this process in the next 5 years. Yeah, but with that, I will hang out in this room. But
Yes.
feel free
Oh,
to leave the breakout room if you, unless you want to ask another question.
yeah, and I know someone just messaged in the chat about that they have a plan for Winthrop. I would urge you, if you want to send that to betterbusproject@mbta.com, you could share it there and we can get it to the right people. And Andrew, there's a compliment in the chat about the bus lanes near Malden Center, which are nice, and how to prevent people from parking in those very nice bus lanes.
Yes, that's something that it's always a challenge, just trying to encourage good compliance with bus lanes across the system. So, most of our bus lanes are on municipal roadways, so we coordinate with whichever city or town that facility is in, see if there are things that we can do to improve compliance as much as possible. But I think we're also trying to think about some other ways that we can think about this on a system-wide level, so that's not just up to every city or town. So nothing specific to report back here, but something that we're very much aware of and want to improve going forward.
And someone else is asking, since it's your bread and butter, I believe that's a direct quote from you. What steps are you doing to work with towns to incorporate more bus lanes? What is that process like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, as a part of Bus Network Redesign and our larger Better Bus project, I think Doug mentioned earlier, we have Bus Network Redesign, and then we have our fleet and facilities program. So that's improving all our bus garages and expanding our fleet, like I mentioned earlier. And then bus priority is kind of like the third part of that trifecta. So we are in the process of doing like a system-wide analysis of where we anticipate that we'll need to see new or expanded bus priority in the future in order to make this service plan possible. So, if we're adding more bus service to certain streets, we want to make sure we're getting ahead of that and putting in bus lanes ahead of time. So we're doing that system-wide analysis. We have a bunch of projects that are going in the ground right now, and we're also involved in some longer planning processes on certain corridors. But like I said, my team's definitely having active conversations with many of the municipalities that we talked about tonight, and working with them to identify the corridors that are where bus service is congested today and unreliable, therefore, and thinking of some ways that we can look at bus lanes or other traffic signal improvements or what have you to speed up service. So yeah, we're definitely looking to expand that network over the next couple of years. I think we're getting called back to the
I
main
think we
session.
are. So I think we
So
can leave. So
thanks
thank you
everyone.
again. Thank
Take
you.
care. Happy
Bye-bye.
Thanksgiving.